So thank you very much for coming. Today we are pleasure to have here Sabine Marcelis, one of the talented Dutch designers today, and she will talk about her creative adventures and maybe much more. So we will see. Thank you very much for coming to Prague.
Thank you for having me.
It's yours.
Hello. I will sit down. So I'm Sabine Marcelis. Based in Rotterdam. I have my studio, and I find it always very difficult to explain to people, like when they're like, "So what do you do?" And it's like, "Oh, I make stuff." But I guess to maybe define it in one sentence, because I work kind of on quite a broad scale within design. I guess I run a studio for product, installation and material design, and forever in search of magical moments within materiality and manufacturing processes to create unexpected experiences. It's kind of the core of what I'm always searching for within any project. And just to give a little bit of background about myself, I guess. I was born in the Netherlands, and I immigrated with my family to New Zealand when I was 9. And then I lived there until I was 23. And I did 2 years of Bachelor of Industrial Design in Wellington in New Zealand. And then it was quite a strict, or not strict, but more traditional way of teaching, like very industrial design. And I wanted a little bit more freedom in a way of working. So then I transferred into the 3rd year of Design Academy in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And I did my last 2 years of the Bachelor there. This is going way back. I graduated in 2011. So this was my graduation project. It was an installation to make wine at home. And I think if I look back now, it's really not what I'm doing anymore. But still, at the core of this project was the need to sort of showcase an interesting effect. Because I think when you're making wine, all these interesting moments happen, like when the sugar is starting to ferment, all this bubbling, and the fruits, the sediment settles. So during the whole process, it goes through all these interesting phases. And instead of having this process be sort of like a dirty secret in the basement, I wanted to showcase these beautiful moments as more of like an aquarium in a living space. So that was my graduation project. And my other graduation project was a table which again has many phases to it. So it can be transparent, and then it's like a work table, and it can be opaque, and then you're shut off from your work life. So it's a table for when you're working at home. But I think, when I look back and analyze a way of working, even with these projects, it was a lot about the material, you're using a material to show or hide certain things. And this was definitely also the project which got me really interested in working with glass and working together with a specialist to develop a material that can do what I want it to do. So there's these moments of wonder that I want to keep finding and work with in projects. So this is also, I'm sort of going through a timeline of different projects I've done. I hope it doesn't start being boring. But this was a clock, which again uses an interesting material, an existing material, which you can only see through when you're looking at it straight on. So I have a little video which shows how it works. So this is me holding a plate in front of an object, and then when it goes on an angle, it's you can no longer see through it, and only straight on you can see through it. So I thought this is a really interesting thing, and it would be interesting to apply it to a clock so that you're not constantly confronted with this idea of time, but that you really have to actively seek out to find out what the time is. And this is also another project I did quite soon after graduating, which was a light installation in New Zealand. And it's, when you walk past it, it's just a very anonymous object on the wall, like in the top image. And you really have to activate it by spinning it, and then you get this this color wheel. Like the arms all have RGB LEDs, and then yeah, you're creating the color wheel. And this was another clock. I did a lot of clocks earlier. I think it's because it's something where you can, one object has many phases. So this was a collaboration with an engineer. And again, it's a very anonymous object, but it has these hot spots, and it has a heat-activated paint. So instead of having hands of a clock showing what time it is, it has isolated dots which light up, or they don't light up. It's the paint becomes transparent, so it shows the back, and that's how it indicates time. And this was really a super technical project, and they really developed this like motherboard for it, and it was a nice example of a collaboration that really works, because everyone really has their role that they're really good at, and then together you can make something that you couldn't do alone, which I think is super important in many projects. So this shows a bit the effect. So it has these like breathing spots that sort of appear and disappear. And yeah, I wanted to talk a bit, it's like going through a timeline. So all these projects I sort of just did in between after graduating. But I didn't obviously just sort of graduate and then I was like, now I'm a designer and everyone wants to buy my stuff and it's all okay. So I knew I didn't really want to have a job or work for a company or another designer. So I got my own studio and I sort of went there every day and sat down. I was like, okay, what am I going to do today? And then through friends and certain connections, I started freelancing for artists and fashion designers, because there was kind of a moment where it was quite clear that I have this like interest in production processes and materiality, and quite a good technical know-how that was it was a good addition to these fashion designers that wanted to make shoes or wanted to produce certain things that they could use some help with. So in the first few years that I was working for, or had my own studio, I was really doing mainly work for other people. So they weren't my designs, but I helped to realize the designs of other people. So it was, like these shoes, and like impossible bags that were 3D milled. And so all these projects, it was really about trying to sort of produce the impossible. And that's really what I'm super interested in finding ways to produce any design, and really working together with manufacturers, to make these designs possible. So first it was all for other people. I did a lot for this Danish artist Foss for the Celine stores. And it was, a really interesting learning curve to figure out these production processes, and then for lots of different items. These were actually made, the prototypes were made in the Netherlands, and then later on here in Novibor. And really like spanning many different materials and ways of production. So this is all done with a chainsaw. And I think it's really nice to also find these people that are really good at what they're doing, and then then in a way you get this network of people that you know, like, okay, for wood I need to use that guy, for metal I need to use that company. And for
but you didn't design the pieces.
No. So I was...
You were more like managing the production.
Yes, exactly. Or figuring out how to make the designs reality. Yeah. So I did that for, a few years, and then just a few of my own projects in between. And it wasn't until like late 2014, beginning of 2015, so really quite recently, that I really more started to focus on my own work, and then was doing less of the production stuff and more of my own things. And focusing a lot on glass. Especially, I think glass is really like my weak spot. So in 2013, together with another designer, Brits van Nerve, and the glass company that I had worked with during my graduation project, we did like a study into optical effects using glass, and we made this collection of mirrors that each have their own unique way of sort of creating a shift in perception. So either they were just partially mirrored, so you get this play with reflection and shadow, or the shape was more the optical illusion, and a lot of layering and laminating, and using foils, and just really sort of playing around in the factory and seeing what we could make with the existing production capabilities. So this is one of the designs. It's the off-round mirror, and here it shows a bit the production process. So it's a hand-drawn line, which is then digitalized, and laminated with a glass and mirror, and then it's CNC'd. So that shows a little bit the way it's made.
So you were producing these pieces under your brand or for some special project?
This was just a completely free project that Britt and I did together. So we're making it still to this day under our own names.
And you sell it under your name?
Yeah. So it's sold through different galleries, and also directly through the studio. And then, through the years, I keep working with this glass company, and sort of, trying out new ways of using or combining their materials and adding new materials, also testing a lot with metals and laminating. And then since last year, I've been applying that research also not just into design objects, but together with architects into spaces. Here are some more experiments with using the same technique of applying color to the glass, but then applying it to metal. It's a dye sublimation process. And here, then that metal is again laminated with glass, so it's really like a process of trying out things and then combining it again with other things and seeing what works. And then, you can really create on a larger scale more architectural elements that really play with the space more than just a one-on-one human scale. So this year with OMA, I did a project in Paris, a jewelry store, where there was a lot of material exploration so that the shop would really have its own unique aesthetic. So it's a 3-floor shop, and each floor really had to have its own its own feel. And the ground floor is actually made out of this tri-vision, like rotating billboard idea. So this is the same space, And on the left, it's laminated aluminium with glass. And then if it moves to the side, then it's like copper mirror. So the whole space can have 3 complete different looks, like the whole walls just change color.
So the elements are like triangle shape.
Yeah. So like it's like that, and then like how these advertising billboards work.
How they use it? Like how they use it? Like some specific occasion why it's like this side or that side?
One side has it can showcase vitrine, so it has the jewelry inside of the panels as well. I think I'm not entirely sure how they use it, but at the opening it was just like rotating.
So it's not according as you pass in, but it's like mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like an interactive installation. They can decide which side they want to show. And this is the top floor. So this was the left image. And there it was again playing with this semi-reflective surfaces. So trying out a lot of different ways to make it super matte, but still keeping a bit of a reflection. And then in the basement, it's like this copper color wash, which goes through the whole space. So on one end, it's really a different color than when you get to the other side. So it was a super nice project to really think more about how you experience a space as well. And just last month, actually, was another project I did together with OMA, and it was the entrance of the KaDeWe department store in Berlin. And again, it's like, then you really have to think about how someone experiences the space as they walk through, because it's super reflective, and there's lights that also interact with it, and also the buildings opposite on the other side of the street. So there's all these other elements you have to think about, which when you're making an object that sort of demands its own attention, you can do whatever you want. But when it has to, sort of inhabit a space that already has all these other things, it's a whole nother thing, which I think is a nice challenge.
Maybe just, I'd like to ask you also, because maybe someone doesn't know that Oma is like one of the biggest architecture offices in the world, or like the Red Cross, or how happened that the young designers you started to collaborate with such a heavyweight in architecture scene?
Well, OMA is an architecture firm based in Rotterdam, and I think Rotterdam is quite small, so they were aware of the type of work I was doing, and was experimenting with materials. So then it was one of the partners, Ippolito. He thought that it could be interesting to try and use these experiments in a spatial context. So it was, I was very lucky that they sort of had took some, like a leap of faith in me, I guess, and that also their clients were interested in working that way. So besides glass, I'm very into resin as well, polyester resin. And I think also because it has the same kind of material properties as glass, like you can really play and manipulate the transparency, or make it super opaque. You can change the colors, and you can polish it to make it super reflective, or you can keep it matte. So it has this same way of manipulating its properties as glass. But the nice thing with resin is that it's something that I can also do myself. Like I can touch it. I don't need these massive autoclaves to laminate it. Like with the glass, it's understanding how the machinery works and working with this big professional, like industrial machinery. But with resin, it's much more something that you can be more hands-on with, and I can do the experiments with my own hands instead of relying on this big machinery. So with resin, I've done also some projects for fashion brands. So the pink cube and the transparent, the cubes on the right hand side. There's also metal ones. Again, like using this material in a directly applied context. So you again have to think about more factors than just, is it gonna look good, or there's other things to work with. And this just gives a little bit of a idea of how nice and how annoying the material is to work with. For instance, at the bottom, the left cube, it seriously has like a fraction less pigment in it, but it completely changes the whole appearance, because then you can see that it actually is hollow and it has a floating bottom to it. It has wheels so that you can move the object around. But all the magic is gone because you can see through it. Whereas the other, the cubes, the whole idea is that it looks like a solid piece. So it's a really nice material to work with, but there's also a lot of different factors that come into play. Like if the room is more humid than the day before, the color is different. If you're casting bigger objects, then because it gets a lot hotter, the color can again be affected. So another project I use resin in is the voir lights. So this is a completely free project for myself, not for a client or anything. And here I'd always really wanted to work with neon, and then I thought it would be really interesting to see how you can manipulate this line of light by adding another material. So with this lighting series, the neon is going through the resin, and then with some of them, it's really diffusing it. And with others, it just really changes the color of the neon, because the color of the resin and the color of the neon mix. Or it sort of dims it. It was really a study in how this addition of one material can change the effect. And here you can also see a bit, like if there's a lot of white pigment in the mix, it really it blows out the light. And when it's dark, it keeps like a crisp line, but it sort of dims it like sunglasses would. And then with this project, it's nice too, because you have to work with specialists again. I can't like make my own neon. It's a very specific craft. And then I really enjoy projects like this, because also for the craftsmen, it's interesting to see their work used in this new way instead of just like signage on a building. So you're like asking them also to sort of push their limits, to try and do something new. And this is a local guy in Rotterdam, and he's been doing it for years. And it's nice to have this sort of close working relationship with someone that really is on top of what they're doing. And so the follow-up from that investigation into light paths was another series of lights. So with the other lights, the interesting moment of wonder happens when the light would go inside of the material. So the difference is where the light is outside and where the light goes into the resin. So then the next step, I wanted to make everything happen inside of the resin. So the light doesn't actually leave the object at all. It's all just a white neon inside one piece of resin. But that piece of resin has been cast in a way that it has multiple colors, and that way the line really changes all within the object. So you can see here were some tests where part of the object is super transparent, and then the other half of it is really a lot of white pigment. So then there the light will be really blown out, and the color changes as it travels through the object as well. Here you see some early tests of the concept. And then, as with the glass and actually any other material experiment, it can start off as a very small thing, but anything can be scaled up. So with these lights, like I've now made them like bigger than this, the projection. So I think that's also quite interesting when you are experimenting on a small scale, to then see it also be something on a larger scale. And yeah, this was a couple of weeks ago in Miami. These lights get presented at a design fair. So this is the latest project, which is still in the same theme of manipulating a light path. And I did this for Dutch Design Week. But here it was using a new material that I hadn't worked with before. It's called Hymax, and it's like a natural acrylic stone. I don't know if you know Korean. It's like the competition of Korean. It's like it's a similar material. So with that material again, I made it super thin, and then it's interesting because it's a composite material. So some of the options that you can get within this material, it's really made up out of all these flakes of different opacities, and you don't really see it so much when you're just looking at it, but then when you put a light behind it, it really sort of exposes these different composites inside of it. So like in the bottom left image, you can really see the second to right piece. It's got all these flakes in it. So then it was also a series of lighting where again you have one line of white light which changes as it goes through all these different materials with different opacities and color.
And what is this name from?
Bars and Bloemhof. So it's a project initiated by them, and they are the distributor of Hymax. So they have a library of materials that are available for architects to use, and then they initiated this project to show like what else you could do with the material as a sort of an inspiration for people to use the material.
How is it connected together? Like, is it disarmable or?
It's all glued together.
All glued together.
Yeah, so it really becomes one piece. And that's quite nice with the Hymax. It's a solid surface, so it comes as a sheet, and it can be bent and glued almost seamlessly. Like you don't really see that it's made out of sheets. But then again, the resin is cast, so you have these different production processes, but it comes together as one object.
And the light, how do you incorporate the light like to the inside? Is it rolled inside?
Yeah. So it's maybe you can see it better in this. In the resin, it's really like carved out a channel for it to sit in. But where the Hymax is, it's like if you imagine cutting it in half, it just looks like that. So it sits inside of it. This is like the latest project I've done. It's for a new fashion brand in the Netherlands called Salle Privé. And they just opened their first store, and it was again like this question of, okay, we want some like an interesting material or some like a cherry on the cake for the shop, which was already designed. so we made, and this was a project that had to be super quick. It was like, the guy called me like 3 weeks before they opened. It was like, can you make something? I was like, okay, shit, what are we gonna do? So this was actually using a lot of the like old pieces of resin or sort of cut-offs and projects that just it didn't really go how it should have. So there were all these leftover blocks, and then it's cast all in a transparent resin. So there's all these, it's like a composition of blocks floating inside a solid. And then it stands in the shop. Yeah, there. Yeah, so everything I'm trying to do is trying to use interesting materials in new ways. So right now I'm developing a lot of metal and glass combinations, which are actually partially laminated, so you don't have a solid surface, but parts of it are still bendable. And then working with those material properties to create furniture and objects. And that's all happening in this machine in Ireland. So this is the main thing I'm focusing on at the moment for next year. And hopefully, yeah, I can carry on sort of working the way I'm working now, where it's both more self-initiated, free artistic objects, and on the other hand, the same research and experimentation can be applied to architectural projects or for more like client brand-based work. So that's a bit of an overview of what I do. Ta-da!
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, maybe we met each other in Bratislava in September, and you told me that I asked you about if some, because your work is quite visible and popular in press and magazines and so on. So I was wondering if some brands are asking you to design products for them, like furniture brands and lighting brands. And you said yes, but you were like more kind of in distance to these commissions. What is your
Yeah.
now? Or?
Yeah, I did get asked by a couple of brands to make like a cheap version of a gallery piece, which I think is not a very smart thing to do. So I sort of said like, okay, well, it could be interesting to work with a brand it's like an interesting challenge to do something that I wouldn't do otherwise for gallery work. But it shouldn't be just a cheaper version of what I've already made. So then I did actually sort of start working with one brand just to test it out. And they sort of requested an object, which it's a very like ordinary, everyday object. And there was no restrictions, because I know, of course, with brands it has to be like within a certain price range, and it has to be not too heavy to ship and all these sorts of things. But they said, no, we don't want to restrict you, just to design how you would want to design it. So I did, and I thought it was quite interesting, and they did also too expensive to produce. So then they asked to make it simpler or cheaper. But then when I started thinking how I could do that, it becomes a design which like all 1,000 other designers could have also made, and then I kind of start to wonder then like what's the point? Then they like what do they need me for? So I kind of sort of stopped with that. And I think, of course, there's nothing wrong with working for brands, and there's like amazing, very clever designs which are super necessary. But I think for what I want to do, it just doesn't work because it's expensive processes, and that's what I'm after, so then it automatically sort of falls in this gallery range. And yeah.
And what do you think about, in general, about this like kind of gallery scene? Because maybe from the outside it seems kind of a big bubble, like all these design Miami and so on. There are just like, I don't know, 20 galleries in the world to producing like these kind of artistic design pieces. Is it sustainable for designer to design just these like limited editions art pieces? Are there people who are buying it? Is it, I don't know if you can uncover something, I don't know, Victor Hunt, or are they successful to
I
bring
think
the pieces to the audience?
Yeah, no, I think if it's at a fair and people see it, and I think I was very lucky because I had a show in a museum directly after Design Miami, so then it's also shown in like this museum context. So no, the pieces definitely sell, and it's quite nice when people, because all like the dawn lights, they're all unique pieces. So it's also that if people see it and they're like, oh, we really like this, but it's a little bit too small or too big for the space I imagine it in, then it's quite nice. This year I've had a few jobs where you go and see the person's house and then you're like, okay, that wall, like what would look nice there? And then you get to work more on like a personal level, and
It's like kind of personalized design.
yeah, which I think is really nice. And it can sort of only work in that context because it's really expensive material and an expensive way to produce it, and it takes time. But I think, I'm sure a lot of designers live completely off that way of working. But for me, I still really also enjoy doing these like jobs with architects or for fashion brands. Also because I think I like feed off the diversity. I get ideas from one way of working and can apply it in the other, and vice versa. And I do also financially still need it for sure. Yeah.
And also for the background of the, I don't know, semi-professional snowboardist or professional snowboardist?
No, well, I tried to be, but I wasn't good enough.
Is it still some, it's kind of maybe connected to your work, like I don't know, maybe some physical activity during the process of this, like pouring the resin or something like that?
I think a lot, well, my work, it's obviously very artificial, like the way it's made, but it has a lot of inspiration from nature in it, especially the way that like the sky is colored and the way that light interacts with clouds, and it's all like sort of in that realm. And especially actually with snowboarding, I always found it really fascinating that when it's a certain visibility, like if it's really flat light, then you put on different goggles, because then you can like change the way that you like you see the snow. And I mean, that's also very much like manipulating light, and I think it's all connected, even though maybe not super consciously, but I think I've always been really interested in that. And I was talking to someone about it the other day that had been like doing sports on at a high level. It also really teaches you to just like keep going, and you have like a focus, and you want to like get that goal, and you have to keep failing until it works. So maybe not like in the aesthetics of my work, but my way of working, like I definitely always just like don't stop until I get there. And also like working with these factories, most of the time they're like, no, we don't want to try this. This is like, yeah, it's like annoying for them to have some like girl come in and like, let's try this. And so I think also having to convince people that no, it's super cool, like imagine if it works, then you have something special, like this sort of determination of like, no, we have to do this. I think you also kind of learn that when you're doing sports at a certain level, I guess.
Can I ask like now you mentioned this supernatural things like sky, snow, daylight. How you see this combination with this super artificial materials like we are using? They are quite like chemicals. So how it goes together?
They don't, I guess. It's more like maybe a weird juxtaposition that you're kind of imitating nature with an artificial material. But the reason I'm drawn to those materials is because you can emulate those effects with them.
It's a question of aesthetics, I guess.
Yeah.
Aesthetically,
Yeah.
these materials are evoking these things that you're saying.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
maybe I thought it like in a different way, like the question of ecological
Sustainability.
Yeah.
For example, these materials are quite typical for like sculptures here, and I know it's quite dangerous to work with them, like for breathing and like that. So for me, it's like almost boring to this.
How do you, sorry, I think I know what you mean.
I don't know how to explain. I mean, these materials for me, they are really on the opposite of this things like nature. So
On the value level.
Yeah.
yeah, when you are just like, but it's not your way of maybe explaining your stuff.
No, I mean, if I can use really environmentally friendly resins, I would totally do that.
Like, maybe you can use it like for instance, like ice and some pigments, and it will be just like for 2 hours, maybe like a performance in the selling shop. Or I don't know. I'm just like right now.
Yeah.
So.
But maybe it's because the pieces are like one-offs or very limited. It doesn't matter time. Like, you know, it's not like produced in thousands or.
Yeah. I definitely rationalize it like that a little bit as well. Because, yeah, I think if you, with making something unique, it's less bad than if you're, making like thousands of chairs in a certain material. But I am aware that it's not the greatest material to work with. Resin, at least. Glass is fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.